Okay. Good morning, everybody. Maxine, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hope everything is okay. I'm used to see you here next to me, but
I know. I
Okay.
hurt my wrist.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Jeremy, did you know Rabbi Hookman, he just passed away?
Yes.
Hi, Maxine.
Okay.
Hi, Susanna.
So we are, if you remember last time we spoke about, we're in 7th chapter. And in the 7th chapter, we said that we have two prophecies. And we kind of divided, like we went to the 2nd chapter. Let's just get, just try to remember what we are. So I'm on chapter 7. And chapter 7, and I'm just going to read. I'm just going to read the Hebrew. You can follow along the English. I'm going to read verses 5 through 11. That's the second prophecy. כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, רעה אחת רעה הנה באה, קץ בא הקץ, הקיץ אלייך, הנה באה הצפירה אליך יושב הארץ, בא העת, קרוב היום מהומה ולא הד הרים, עתה מקרוב אשפוך חמתי עלייך וכלתי אפי בך, ושפטתיך כדרכייך, ונתתי עלייך את כל תועבותייך, ולא תחוס עיני ולא אחמול כדרכייך, עלייך אתן ותועבותייך בתוכך תהיינה. וידעתם כי אני אדוני מכה, הנה היום הזה בא, יצא הצפירה, צץ המטה, פרח הזדון, החמאס קם למטה רשע, לא מהם, לא מהמון, ולא מהמונם, ולא מהם, ולא נוה בהם. Okay, so we kind of already mentioned that, and we said it's kind of a development of the first prophecy. And we spoke about that word tzfira. We spoke about this idea, tzatz hamate parach hazadon. And the idea that this prophecy is actually the question that it brings is, well, it brings this concept of Hamas. And we kind of said it's injustice, immorality, that this is one of the sins. And we raised the question, this is where we stop, which is worse? The Hamas, the immorality, injustice, or all the avodah zarah, all the idol worshiping that is basically specified throughout those prophecies. We're going to have the answer very, very soon. I want to take a look at two difficult words here. One is on Pasuk Yud Aleph, mehem. Radak suggested that mehem is a kind of a liturgical element to kind of say double or twice mehem from them. So that means he's trying to say that nothing, absolutely nothing is gonna remain from them. Okay? And then Noah is from the word nehi, that means cry. That means that because of all the troubles and all the bad stuff, the people who are spared, the people who are even going to survive, are not going to be even able to mourn and to cry the dead. Correct. And then look at verses 12 and 13. Ba'at higia hayom, hakone al yismach והמוכר על יתאבל כי חרון אל כל המונה, כי המוכר אל הממכר לא ישוב, ועוד בחיים חייתם, כי חזון אל כל המונה לא ישוב, ואיש בעוונו חייתו לא יתחזקו. I'm going to read that in English. The time has come, the day has arrived. Let the buyer not be glad, nor the seller mourn, for fury is upon her entire multitude. For the seller, he will not return to that which he was sold as long as his soul is alive. For there was a prophetic vision for her entire multitude. It will not return. For man, his very being remains with his iniquity. They will fortify themselves. Difficult psukim to understand. We're talking about a buyer and a seller. But we're not talking about somebody who sells something, whatever that is, to make a living. But rather, we're talking about somebody who is obliged, somebody who has no choice but to sell their land because they are broke. And in this sense, usually what happens when there's a transaction like that, so we feel bad for the one who needs to sell, you say nebech, but the buyer is very happy. Probably the buyer is making a good deal, right? Then have a new property. That's usually the case. But what does the prophet says? The prophet says there's absolutely no reason to be happy, to rejoice, not the seller and not the buyer. Why? Because the whole country is going to be destroyed. So he says to the seller, don't feel bad because you're going to lose your land anyway. So it really doesn't matter. Yes, you're losing your land, but it's just a matter of time that you would have lost it anyway to the enemy. That's number one. Don't rejoice, he says to him also, because it's not like the good old days where during the Jubilee, you will get your land back. That's not going to happen. So even if you have those thoughts that perhaps that someday you will get your land back, that's not going to happen. There's absolutely no reason to rejoice. And then he says to the buyer, don't be happy because this is very temporary. Yes, you're getting the land, but it's just temporary. Now, why this is interesting? It's interesting because this is the complete reverse of the prophecy of Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu is commanded also to buy the field of Hanamel ben Shalom, his cousin. And then he asked God, what's the point? The Babylonians are going to take over the land anyway. So what's the meaning of me doing that transaction and buying that land when I know the Babylonians are going to take over very soon? And over there, God tells him, because there's going to be a Geulah, there's going to be a consolation, there's going to be a redemption afterwards. And there's like, it gives like a bunch of psukim that are very uplifting and that, yes, we're going to have destruction. Yes, things are going to be bad. But you know what? There's going to be a day after. Okay, that's Yirmiyahu. But here, nothing. Yechezkel doesn't talk about redemption at all during the first part of the book. It's all bad. It's all about the destruction. It's about all the bad stuff. It's all that we're doomed. So he basically says that there's no point of transaction, of real estate transaction at this point of the game. It's completely meaningless. Okay. Want to continue? Then going to continue talking about all the bad stuff that is going to happen. The chereb, ra'av, dever. I'm going to continue psukim Yud-Daled, so 14 through 19. Let's see if I can do it Hebrew and English at the same time. Kind of thing. Okay. תקעו ותקוע והכין הכל, ואין הולך למלחמה, כי חרוני אל כל המונה. They will blow the horn and prepare everything, but no one will go to war, for my fury is upon all her multitudes. Next pasuk. החרב בחוץ, והדבר והרעב מבית אשר בשדה, בחרב ימות, ואשר בעיר רעב ודבר יאכלנו. The sword is outside, and the plague and famine are inside. Whoever is in the field will die by the sword, and whoever is in the city, famine and plague will consume him. 16. ופלטו פליטיהם והיו אל הערים כיוני הגאיות, כולם הומות איש בעוונו. Their fugitives will flee, and they will be like the mountains, all of them moaning like pigeons of the valleys, each man in his iniquity. 17. All כל הידיים תרפנה וכל ברכיים תלכנה מים. All hands will be weak, and all knees will melt like water. וחדרו שקים וכיסתה אותם פלצות, ואל כל פנים בושה, בכל ראשיהם כורחה. 19. כספם בחוצות ישליכו וזהבם לנידה יהיה. כספם וזהבם לא יוכל להצילם ביום עברת אדוני. נפשם לא יסבעו ומעיהם לא ימלאו, כי מכשול עוונם היה. They will gear themselves in sackcloth, and terror will cover them. On every face will be shame, and all their hands boldness. They will throw their silver in the streets, and their gold will become repulsive, for their silver and their gold will be unable to rescue them on the day of God's fury. They will not satisfy their souls, and they will not fill their stomachs, for it was this stumbling block of their iniquity. The people is called to go into war. That's the shofar. That's right. That's what it says. Tak'u v'takoa. This is how you gather people to go to the war. You blow the horn. And they're going to get ready for that.
Doesn't it remind you that in the 50th year, when the Takoa shofar?
We use
No,
we use
because
the shofar is not only
because of the sale.
Yeah, that's what he says. Even during the 50th year,
yeah,
it's not going to go back.
Yeah, but the Takoa shows me that even in the 50th year it will happen.
Okay. But because God is so angry with the people of Yerushalayim, nobody answers the call. Nobody comes. So the people in Yerushalayim are going to die, hunger and plague, and the people outside by the sword. Those who actually survive going to run into the mountains. They're going to live in fear, despair, depression. They're going to mourn the dead. Silver and gold are going to be thrown out because it's meaningless. There's nothing you can do with that. It's worthless. It's going to be worthless. And now the prophecy going to continue talking about the temple itself. I'm on Pasuk Kaf. Pasuk Kaf, 20. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So what's the question? Okay, so okay. So Hannah is asking, what's the point of specifying all the punishments and why the time difference? Like, what's the point? Because correct. The idea is the time is past for tshuva. We discussed that a long time ago. Number one. Number two, he needs to make sure, he needs to make it real for them. So therefore, he's going to be specific. Number three, and that's perhaps the most important thing, is that what we said, that he, at this point, he's gaining credit. So the more specific he is, the more detailed he is, the more credit he gains, because they're going to say, because he knows that they're not going to listen to him, right? God told him, they're not going to listen to you. But the point is that later on, they're going to say, oh, remember this guy, Yechezkel? Whatever he said, that was true. He was right back then. Maybe for future purposes, we should listen to him. When he's going to start talking about the consolation, when he's going to start talking the end of days, when he's going to start talking about the next stage, which is the second half, or to be more accurate, the third part of the book, they're going to listen. Yes, there's no practical purpose for that at this point, except for gaining credit.
In this condition, in this situation, it's not that today they have to die, and this will come.
He's talking. First of all, you got to understand that he's talking to the people in Bavel. He's talking about the people in Yerushalayim. So it's not that they can do a WhatsApp call and they can see how the brothers live in Yerushalayim. So these are the people in Bavel who do not necessarily understand what's going on in Yerushalayim because they already left years before. Correct. Because that's the remaining people. Correct. Well, to some extent, yes. And it's not distant. It's their brothers and sisters. It's the places that they just left a couple of years before. It's where their fields and their property is. Their children might still be there. They're still connected. They don't know that they're going to be stuck in Babel for 70 years. They think this is something maybe temporary. They have no idea that well, maybe if they listen to Yechezkel, they know that the temple is going to be destroyed. And therefore, everything they understand about Judaism is going to change. They can't even fathom the idea of how can we still, communicate with God without the temple. Everything is going to change. Yes. They did not choose to leave. They were exiled. The enemy sent them, the Babylonians. They forced them. They forced them into ships and sent them. It's not that they had a choice. Yes. It was done in stages. They will leave, they're going to exile. They're going to go into exile as well. But the exile was in stages. First, it was the elite, the leadership that was exiled. It was very planned and political. Okay? You take out the leadership, send them away. Then it's easier to deal with the simple common people when they have no leadership, no spiritual leadership, no political leadership, no nobody, right? And then it was like several more stages until they, pretty much cleaned up the land. Correct. Yeah. The point of destroy themselves, it means that their own actions are the ones that are going to hit them. Okay, I want to go into verse 20. Now he's going to talk about the temple itself. Utzvi adio legaon samahu betzalmei to'avotam shikutzehem asuvo al ken etativ lahem lenida. Translates as, the beauty of his ornament, meaning the temple, he had set for majesty, yet they made their abominable and detestable images within it. Therefore, I've made it into a repulsive thing for them. Pasuk Kaf Aleph. ונתתיו ביד הזרים לבז ולרשעי הארץ לשלל וחיללוהו והסיבותי פני מהם וחיללו את צפוני ובאו פריצים וחיללוהו. And I will give it into the hand of the strangers for plunder and onto the wicked of the earth for spoils, and they will profane it. פסוק כ"ב. והסיבותי פני מהם וחיללו את צפוני ובאו פריצים וחיללוה. I will turn my face away from them, and they will profane the place where I'm hidden, and into it will come lawless people and profane it. Two more psukim. עשה הרתוק כי הארץ מלאה משפט דמים והעיר מלאה חמאס. Make a chain, for the land is full of blood, guilt, and the city is full of injustice. פסוק כ"ד, 24. והבאתי רעי גויים וירשו את בתיהם, והשבתי גאון עזים, וניחלו מקדשיהם. So I will bring the wickedest nations, and they will inherit their houses, and I will put an end to the pride of the mighty, and their holy places will be profaned. Tzvi Adio, Pasuk Kaf, this is the temple. Okay? When he says Legaon, that was the pride. That was the pride of the Jewish people. However, because all those abominations, all that bad stuff was done in the temple, as we're going to see in chapter 8, hopefully very soon. Therefore, the Beit HaMikdash itself is going to be abomination as well. Just like the gold and the silver, completely worthless. And this is an interesting idea. This is it's a core value in Judaism that sometimes we tend to overlook. The concept of Kedusha, holiness, has to do with separation, right? Holy means to separate. Who are the ones that separate, that gives that status? It's us, right? So if take a building and I separate it from the other buildings and I designate that building as a shul, it has holiness, right? In the old days, when I'm a farmer, I have a farm, I have a cattle, whatever, and I separate one animal from the others, that becomes kodesh, becomes holy. I can't do anything, right? That is for the temple, for sacrifices, whatever, a gift, whatever that is. The Kohen is separated from everybody else, right? That's what the holiness of the Kohanim, etc., etc., etc. Now, what happens when the functionality is not there anymore? So let me go back to the animal, right? The farmer set aside, separated that one lamb, let's say, okay? Put the lamb aside, that's holy, that's for the temple. But the lamb had an accident and broke its leg. Just making this up. What happens now? You can't bring it to the temple. Okay, the temple, to bring the temple, it's got to be perfect. Can't have a blemish. That's the rule. It's called mechulal. No, mechulal. It's right. It doesn't have that sanctity, right? So it means that once the functionality is out, it doesn't have the status anymore. To some extent, I'm oversimplifying things. What happens when I have a building? I have a shul. Okay? And that shul is sold because the community is moving to a different place. Right? This shul was built because the community moved from West Adams to Beverly Hills. Right? So what happened to the other building? It loses its sanctity. It's just a building. Because we, the people, decided that it's not separated anymore. It's not designated as a shul anymore. It's just a regular building. Okay? Now, what happens with the Sefer Torah? If the Sefer Torah is kosher, it's holy. What happens if the Sefer Torah is not kosher?
You have to bury it.
Yes, I need to bury it. But what does it mean before I bury it? Can I use it for the purpose of the holiness?
That disappeared.
I can't. Right? It doesn't have that functionality anymore. Yes, I need to fix it by a software if I can. What if if it's not? Okay, so of course I need to discard it in a respectful way, and the custom is burying it. Okay, I get it. But the point is that Sefer Torah does no longer have that sanctity. And because of that, I can actually bury it. Because it's not separated anymore. It doesn't have the functionality. Now let's go to the temple. That's going to be like a little bit hard for people to accept, but it's the same logic. King Solomon built this magnificent building. It is separated from all the other buildings. It is designated and being blessed and whatever for sanctity, rituals, sacrifices, the whole thing. What happens when those things are no longer taking place in the temple? What happens when instead of worshiping Kadosh Baruch Hu, there's abomination and there's avodah zarah? That's the reality that Yechezkel is talking about. What happens? Does it still have the sanctity of the building? No, because we people no longer do those rituals over there that creates the holiness.
So what about the wailing wall?
Get there in a second. So if we don't do that, then the functionality is no longer there. If it's no longer there, and we're going to see the beginning of the next chapter, God says, you know what? If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that's a prophecy that we spoke about already, I'm not going to be there as well. And that's a description of the Shekhinah leaving Beit HaMikdash. And once the Shekhinah is out of there, and what the people did is idol worshiping and all horrible stuff that we're going to see in chapter 8, then it becomes just a building, becomes just bricks with no sanctity, no nothing. And that gives the, so to say, gives the ability or gives that, permission to destroy it. Now, Hannah is asking, what about the Kotel? So I can go into like the whole famous debate about the Rambam and the Ramban. They have a fascinating debate when it comes to the sanctity, the status of sanctity on Temple Mount. The Rambam says that once it was sanctified, we're talking about Second Temple, never loses its sanctity, meaning that mountain, that geographical area, no matter what happens there, can never lose its sanctity, period. That's the Rambam, Maimonides. Ramban, on the other hand, says, absolutely not. It's just like the first temple, it's just like everything else. If it functions in the way it was supposed to function, it's holy. And if it's not, then it's not. Now, having that in mind, put it aside for a second. What is the Western Wall? Okay, it's the outer, right? It's the outer, so to say, fence, outer wall of Beit HaMikdash. Beit HaMikdash doesn't exist anymore. I'm sorry?
The purpose
Of the Azara.
it's
What?
it's to support the hill on top of which was the temple. I'm wrong.
It was the
It's not the
wall.
wall of the temple.
No, it's not the wall of the temple, of the courtyard. Yeah. Now, just a sec. Let me just finish this. So, technically, that's not part of the temple. Technically, that was not even holy, because that was not even part of the building. It was the fence of the courtyard. So you say, yeah, has no sanctity. But what is it used for? For hundreds of years, actually for 2,000 years, more. What is it used as?
Place of worshiping.
Place of worship, exactly, for tefillah. And because we, the Jewish people, daven there, absolutely holy. Absolutely it's holy. Because I can take also a building in Beverly Hills and make it holy. It doesn't have to be over on Temple Mount. It can be even here in Beverly Hills. It can be anywhere. And that's one of the core values of another value of Judaism, that God can be worshipped anywhere. And that's a huge change, something that happened, that developed after the destruction of the second temple. Because it actually started after the destruction of the first temple, but really was codified after the destruction of the second temple. Because up until then, worship took place in the temple. That's it. Yes, people daven. But that was like, please God, help me find parking space or whatever, help me with the test, help me with, that was something spontaneous, informal, done by individuals, not something as a form of worship. It was like a conversation. In the temple, period. What do you do when the temple is no longer there? So there's a transfer. There's a transfer, and this is like huge on a theological level. Huge. What happens? Right? So the rabbis come and they say, you don't need the temple to worship God. You can do it anywhere. You can do it in Bavel. You can do it in Beverly Hills. You can do it anywhere. And that's exactly what Yechezkel says. Melo chol haaretz kevodo. Blessed is the name of God from wherever he is. Wherever it is. Bavel, Israel, Beverly Hills, truly doesn't matter. Because God is everywhere. It's a fascinating discussion by itself, how we were able to transfer this idea of worship in a specific location to the form of worship that we have today, which is tefillah, right? So everybody understand the fact that after the destruction of the temple, it's not that they were able to. They said, okay, so fine, the temple is destroyed. Let's start, using our kitchens to slaughter the animals and start doing that. Everybody understand that that's a big no-no, right? The Torah goes out of its way. The Torah talks about it hundreds of times against the bamot, against like all those, against worshiping, like sacrifice rituals outside the temple. That's a big no-no. That's very straightforward. So everybody understand that that's not going to happen.
What if somebody said to you, you are not Israeli because you don't live in Israel?
I don't see the connection to what we're talking about.
Okay, maybe.
So if you want, let's talk about that later. But let's understand what happens there. We had a sacrificial ritual that was done by the Kohanim, right? Whatever, taking the animal, shechting it, the blood, this, that, whatever. Depends on the korban, depends on the time of the day, whatever that is. And then, if we're talking about a korban that was on behalf of, not the communal one, but I'm saying like when somebody brought a korban, chatat asham, shlamim, korban todah, whatever that is, right? When I committed a sin, not knowingly, for example, by accident, though I bring a korban. I want to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I bring a korban, whatever, right? So the Kohanim did the technical aspect, but the owner had a role as well. V'samach yado al rosh hapar or al rosh hachatat vehitvada et chatato asher chata, etc., etc. The owner had to do a confession or phrases of praise and thanksgiving. Without that stuff, meaning with the of the owner, the korban is completely meaningless. So you need two elements. You need the kohen to shecht and deal with the blood and whatever, all that stuff. order to participate, whether to confess, to say vidui, whether to bring the bikurim, whether to shalmei todah, whether to say thanksgiving, whether to eat. But the point is that the owner has to go through a process, a process of a mental process. A mental process. Yes, also verbalizing it, but it starts with internal mental process. Without that, the korban is completely meaningless. So what happens? Fast forward. We can't bring the korban. That aspect, let's call it the external act, done, finished. Beit HaMikdash no longer exists. We can't do that. Can't check the animal, can't sprinkle the blood on the corners of the altar. You can't do all of that stuff. But you can confess. You can say, thank you, God. You can do all that stuff that the owner did. Now the rabbi said, okay, that element is no longer there. The external act is no longer there. But the internal act is there. So when they say prayer, unshalma farim sfateinu, prayer instead of korban, when we say that Eizohi avodah, avodah shebalev, when we say what is the worship of the heart, means prayer. So prayer combines the two elements into one. I can't do the external, but I take the internal element, and that becomes my worship. It's the worship of the heart. And that's tefillah. That's how it works. So now, how did we end up with this? I don't remember. Hold on, just like I need to understand something. Okay, so I'm sorry. Yeah, because of Beit HaMikdash. Because Beit HaMikdash is no longer have that sanctity, because Beit HaMikdash does like there's all those abominations, all that bad stuff is happening in Beit HaMikdash. Because of that, Beit HaMikdash doesn't function as Beit HaMikdash, but it functions, as a place of abomination, and therefore it can be destroyed and will be destroyed. Okay? Okay. Let's just finish this chapter. I'm on verse 25. Anna, is your phone on? I think your phone is ringing. Your phone is ringing. והבאתי רעי גויים וירשו את בתיהם והשבתי גאון עזים וניחלו מקדשיהם. A cutting off is coming. They will seek peace, but there will be none. 26. No, sorry. Yes. 25. כפה דבר וביקשו שלום בעין. 26. הובה על הובה תבוא ושמועה אל שמועה תהיה, וביקשו חזון מנביא ותורה תובעת מכהן ועצה מזקנים, המלך יתאבל ונשיא ילבש שממה, וידי עם הארץ תיבהלנה, מדרכם אעשה אותם ובמשפטיהם אשפטם, וידעו כי אני אדוני. 26. Disaster will come upon disaster, and report will be upon report in vain. Will they seek vision from the prophet, and teaching will be lost from the Kohen, and counsel from the elders. The king will mourn, and the leader will be clothed with concentration, and the hands of the people of the land will be confronted. I don't know what it means. It will act with them I will act with them according to their ways, and by the judgment they deserve, I will judge them. Then they will know that I am God. So, Kfada on Pasuk of Hey 25, Kfada va ubikshu shalom ba'ain. Kfada is it's the only time we see it in the Bible, by the way, and it's krita, it's cutting. That's the way they translate in the article. It seems very accurate. Hova al hova. Hova is trouble. Okay. Yeshayahu says, "Hova alayich ra, lo ted'i shachra v'tipol alayich hova lo tuchli, kapra avolach pitom shoah lo tedai." So Yeshayahu used the same word, and we understand that from there. Ushmual shemuat tihiyeh. It means that, how to translate it here, that news. How they said it? Report will be upon report. And what's interesting here that it's the description of the failure of the leadership. Right? When things are bad, now they're going to seek the Kohen, the Navi, the leadership. But it's too late and it's too little. The leaders are going to mourn, and the ability to lead is gonna fly away from them. They're not going to be able to lead. They're not going to be able to give good counsel. And people are going to react with despair, and with panic. And that is part of the punishment itself. Midarkam e'aseh otam uvemishpeteihem eshpetem v'yadu ki ani Adonai. That's going to be part of the punishment. They are the ones to blame in that punishment. I want to go to at least the beginning of chapter 8. So yes, Hannah.
Something here. I didn't understand, but I know how to believe. Because we had to go ahead to Bamba when Rabbi went up to get the Torah. That's all the look what they're doing there. So then they decided they're going to do the oil or that, whatever it is. And that says, I agree to this, the Shachan, the Torah.
Okay, so what's the question? Yeah. He's saying, I'm leaving. That's exactly what happens in the next pasuk. He's leaving them. He's not leaving them. He's leaving the temple. There's a covenant. We spoke about that. There's a covenant, everlasting covenant, that God will never leave us. We're going to be punished, but God will never leave us. He leaves the building, but he's not going to leave us. What do you mean he cannot understand? You can punish your kids. You can even kick them out of the house. But they're always going to be your children. He's not trying to bring them back. Correct. So they should know why they're punished. That's the only reason. He already knows that they're not the hen lo ya'aminu lecha. They're not going to listen to you. It's not about trying to make any change. He said it times. It's not. He's not trying to change anything. Okay? Chapter 8. Now, we see that chapters 8 through 11 is one very long prophecy. And that's kind of like the center of the first half of the book, which is all the way through chapter 24. Now, the most important aspect of that long prophecy is what we call Siluk Shechina, the departure of the Shechina from Beit HaMikdash. Now, I want to go into the first pasuk and do a little math problem. ויהי בשנה השישית, בשישי, בחמישה לחודש, אני יושב בביתי, וזקני יהודה יושבים לפניי, ותיפול עליי שם יד אדוני אלוהים. It happened in the 6th year, in the 6th month, on the 5th of the month, I was sitting in my house, and the elders of Judah were sitting before me, and the hand of the Lord fell upon me there. We have a problem with the date. According to the simple reading, we dealt with that in the very beginning of the book. We said that the Nevuat HaKadashah, the first prophecy in which Yechezkel is told that he is going to be a prophet, is taking place, remember, Barvi'i b'chamisha lachodesh. The 4th month, the 5th of the month. Hi hashana chamishit legalut hamelech Yoyachin, which is supposed to be the 5th year of the exile of King Yoyachin. Now we know that the continuation of that prophecy was 7 days later. Look at chapter 3. We went through that. And if that's the case, that prophecy in which he is commanded to lie, right, with the brick and the whole thing, chapter 4, that it means cannot happen before the 12th of Tammuz. Now, he's commanded to lie on his left side, remember, then his whole thing, for 430 days. Assuming that a regular year is 354 days, it means that it's supposed to end already on the 29th of Elul of the 6th year. It means the problem, forget about, just summarize all the numbers, just understand that there's a problem with the date because he is already with the elders of Yehuda on the 5th of Elul. He's supposed to be lying on his side on the 29th of Elul. He's saying that he is already on the 5th of Elul, sitting with the elders of Yehuda. We have a problem here. That's not possible, right? So, couple of explanations. One, Radak, Rabbi Kimchi, explains that was a leap year. If it's a leap year, they have 13 months. It's not a problem. We have extra 30 days. Boom, no problem. Okay. Then he adds, but you know what? I'm a chassid of the Rambam altogether. Remember when we discussed the Rambam? The Rambam said what? The whole thing is here. It didn't happen in reality. It's just a vision. Well, if it's a vision, then what's the meaning of dates? It works as well. Okay? Now, if we're going to take the approach that we suggested in the first chapter, and we said that these are 2 different times. That means that the opening pasuk, b'chamishi chodesh, is actually the last thing that happened, if you remember, like a couple of months ago. That means that's the intro, but it was written as an epilogue. Then there's no contradiction altogether as well. Yes. Oh. So, according to that explanation, Nevuat HaKadashah did not necessarily take place on the 4th of the month. Could happen anytime. So that's not. So there's no contradiction because the clock doesn't start from that point. So the whole math works. So either the Rambam's approach that it's all in the mind, therefore it's not a problem, or the Radak explanation, it was a leap year and therefore it works, the math works, or what we suggested that we're talking about two different episodes, two different times that do not necessarily start at the same time, and therefore it could work as well. Now, we don't know why the elders of Yehuda actually came to see Yechezkel. It just said that they were there. Okay, so but they're not going to listen to him anyway. So
They're not going to listen, but they're going
to hear, okay, that's a nice kvetch, fine. But what we do know that once he called the hand of God, falls on him, he kind of like has an out-of-body experience, basically, has a vision. And only at the end of that vision, in chapter 11, because as I said, it's a one long prophecy from chapter 8 to chapter 11. Only in chapter 11, verse 25, he's back in Bavel, in his mind, the vision, right? And he says, "Va'adaber el hagola et kol divrei Adonai asher erani." And I said to the people in exile, everything that I've seen. So he is having an out-of-body experience now. Now, what is the reason why the elders of Judah came to see him? We're going to see that very soon. Well, not very soon. That's going to be next time already. So have that in mind because that's a very, very important question. But Yechezkel is taken to a virtual tour in Yerushalayim. That's what happens. Pasuk Bet. ויראה, והנה דמות כמראה אש, ממראה מותניו ולמטה אש, וממותניו ולמעלה כמראה זוהר, כעין החשמלה. When I read all through the Pasuk Dalet. וישלח תבנית יד, ויקחני בציצית ראשי, ותישא אותי רוח בין הארץ ובין השמיים, ותביא אותי ירושלים אלוהים אל פתח שער הפנימית, הפונה צפונה, אשר שם מושב סמל הקנאה המקנה. והנה שם כבוד אלוהי ישראל כמראה אשר ראיתי. I saw and behold, there was a likeness like the appearance of fire, the appearance of his loins, and downward there was fire, of a radiance like the color of the chashmal. You'll see Rashi on the second. Then he stretched forth the form of a hand and took me by a lock of my head, and a wind carried me between the earth and the heavens and brought me to Jerusalem in divine visions, to the entrance of the inner gate that faces northward, where the seat of the provocative image of provocation stood. And behold, the glory of God of Israel was there, like the appearance that I had seen in the valley. So first of all, we see like a little deja vu to the prophecy that we had in the third chapter. Now, this image, this dmut that takes Yechezkel is the same dmut, the same image that he sees in the first chapter, whatever that means. Dmut kemareh esh, whatever, the same image, the same figure. Yes. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
And this is why Ezekiel is so touchy. Study.
Correct. Excellent point. Daniel just mentioned that in the Greek translation, which is actually based on Tirgum HaShivim, it's the word is not esh, but ish, man. It means that it's the image of what we call referred to as image of God, image of man. Now, this is very
And then,
debatable.
and
Yes.
then description of the book
Yeah.
is
Yeah. And then therefore,
the loin
Right.
of the ash.
Right.
No.
well, so I don't know exactly what it means, but there's like not a lot of translations about that. But the point is that Mar'eh Demut Kvod Adonai, the image of God, whatever that means. But when he gets to Yerushalayim in this virtual tour, again he sees Kvod Elohei Israel Kamarei Asher Raiti B'Bikar. Kvod Elohei Israel Kamarei Asher Raiti B'Bikar. Just like what I saw in the valley, right, in the previous. So there's like kind of like, I think, some sort of intention to blur the things and make it very vague.
Reminds me of the Cine Boel.
There's an element of fire in both, yes. Now, what's interesting is, so there's this vagueness, this unclarity of about this image. And what's interesting is that Rashi in Pasuk Bet says, Asur lehitbonen bepasuk zeh. One should not look into this pasuk, meaning do not investigate it. And this is why Yechezkel is such a problematic book, because of stuff like that, that even Rashi himself says, okay, stay away from that. So we're not going to try to understand exactly what is that mood, because we have no ability even to comprehend what it means. However, one word which is interesting, chashmala, or chashmal later on, has nothing to do with electricity of today, the modern Hebrew. That's Eliezer ben Yehuda came with that word of chashmal. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I think that he took it from here. I think that Eliezer ben Yehuda took it from here. It's like this magical thing, has to do with fire, has to do with brightness. Makes sense to Eliezer ben Yehuda to call it chashmal. Maybe. But most Meforshim actually say that chashmela is a certain color. They're not saying which one, and probably, I guess there's a variety of opinion, but it's sort of a color. Okay, so it's take it as any way you want it, whether it's a color or radiance or whatever, something like that. So we're going to stop here. I'm just going to say that in this journey that Yechezkel is starting to take now, he's going to have 4 stops. 4 stops. And each stop, he's going to see one type of avodah zarah, of abomination in the temple. And what happens is, it's something that's going to go in progression. Every stop is going to be worse than the other. So it's going to, the level of avodah zarah is going to increase. And it's going to be more and more problematic. And then this surprise at the end of the fourth station, there's a surprise that will answer our question from, actually we started that last week, and we're going to end again with that question again. We're talking about avodah zarah all the time. And that's the problem. And that's what he sees in Yerushalayim and the temple and everything. How come the prophecy, in his prophecy, he talks about Hamas, he talks about injustice, he talks about immorality, all the stuff that has to do with ben Adam lachavero, between men, and not the relationship with God. If the problem is avodah zarah, then it's between men and God. Why he's talking about punishments that has to do with about sins, ben Adam lachavero? What is worse? what is what we call the final straw that brought the punishment. This is that's you jumping into Second Temple though, but this is Second Temple. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm saying that this concept of sinat chinam, we at this point from Book of Yechezkel, we do not have any proof that was the reason for the destruction of the temple. At this point, we kind of like stuck in the darkness, led to believe that perhaps it was Avodah Zarah. And the Torah is very specific about that. Torah talks about Avodah Zarah, but all that kind of stuff that we talk about, the Tochecha and everything, it all talks about Avodah Zarah. So it makes sense, allegedly, at least, that Avodah Zarah is the problem. Hence, that brings the question: why do we talk about Ben Adam Lachavero as part of the punishment? So just a second. So that we're done for today. What's the dates next week? We should be fine, right? It's January whatever. Wait, let me see. Oh, I think it is. Let me just, what? We can study. Yeah,
Correct?
we can study. So next week, same time, same place. Same book. And I will see you then.
Maybe next thing we don't have that because it is way you should not have to work.